Hi, my name is Dave Reske, CEO of Now Speed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we talk about the best ideas of digital marketing. And my guest today is Maria Scheifler, a 15-year veteran of walking into broken go-to-market systems and making them work across US, Europe, and APAC. Through her firm MKT Velocity, she works to install sprint-based revenue marketing systems, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. So, Maria, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. Just for our listeners, why don't you just give us a little of your background? What brought you to this point in your career?
I've been leading teams for the past 15 years, marketing communications globally, and small companies, Series A to $250 million public companies. And what I've seen throughout my career is that marketing teams, you're never taught how to work, right? At school, you learn the basics, the foundations, then you start working in one company, an agency, sometimes in-house, and you start learning from what others are doing, but you're never taught how to work
Hmm.
and how to really be effective and efficient. And all we hear these days is AI can make you more efficient. You need to embed AI as a new, like, it's part of your you have agents in your teams, and I think that's amazing. I use AI all day every day in my work, right? But at the same time, as the marketing teams grow, like you start with a couple team members and it start growing to 3, 5, 10, like the things change, right? Like the dynamics aren't the same, and so you need to ensure that continuously that the team can keep working together and continue being efficient and effective as they scale. Because when you scale, things break, right? And this is a passion of mine. Um, Ever since I worked for a Scrum Alliance and I learned about agile practices and better ways of working, I've been embedding that in my marketing teams.
Yeah, that's a great introduction. I love what you just said there. When you scale, things break. So we're going to talk about how to create systems and process to keep things from breaking. You and I have been talking about this idea of a sprint-based
Yeah.
marketing operating system, and this is a big passion of yours. Tell me, what do you mean by that? What is a sprint-based marketing operating system?
So today, like I mentioned earlier, like when teams grow, you have 1 to 3 people, then 5 to 10 people. Execution breaks. Like when you scale, things break. There's too many priorities. There's no intake process sometimes, no visibility into the work. There's sometimes endless status meetings when the team grows and like the manager, the director, the VP, the CMO wants to learn what is happening and communicate with the rest of the organization. Sometimes those one-on-ones with your team become more like update meetings instead of like actually coaching or guidance sessions. And these resumes into teams stay very busy, but they do not ship enough meaningful work. So my point is that in today's market, especially post-COVID, post AI, everything's changing. Marketing needs to adapt fast. You need traditional annual planning and project management that are not like those are not enough, right? You need marketing needs to be there needs to be a better way of working. And the big idea, the sprint-based marketing operating system, it helps teams stay aligned to company goals and to revenue priorities, also ship faster, reduce the chaos and the context switching. Because sometimes when you have too many priorities, you're constantly context switching, and that creates delays and it creates lack of focus in the end. Again, it's kind of like that wheel where the chicken and the egg, right? And these system also helps adapt quickly to market feedback, build trust with the sales teams and executives. I think this is one of the most important pieces. Like once you start conveying a new way of working that shows collaboration and transparency, your sales leaders and sales teams and your execs start trusting the marketing team more than maybe before. And like I mentioned earlier, that increasing visibility and that accountability is another thing, right? Like you're telling um, the marketing team and the sales team and across the organization, these are our goals, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're doing, this is what we've done, and it's all aligned. And if you need to pivot, along the ways, you communicate that, right? So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds really powerful. It sounds like you create this alignment. There's less wasted time. You get things done faster, and then you're able to ship more, get more delivered. Everybody wants all of that. But, isn't AI going to just solve all that?
I don't think so.
Can't we just do the prompt and, and make every task faster? And doesn't AI, so why doesn't AI solve all that? Why do you need a whole operating system, as you're describing, the sprint-based marketing operating system to integrate all these pieces to make it work together? Isn't AI just enough?
I think the operating system sits in the bottom underneath. And the AI sits on up top, right? And of course, you're going to need AI to help you augment your content marketing team or your SDR outreach team or your product marketing team and doing research, all those things. Absolutely. You need AI to help you in your day-to-day be more efficient. But something that AI is not going to do is the two pillars of this operating system are culture and the other one those are practices. And it could maybe help with some practices and it can be kind of a coach with you, but let me maybe walk you through what those are, like the culture side and the practices side. So the reason why I say culture is so important is because for the system to work, there needs to be a right mindset. And the leader, the marketing leader needs to have that, and the rest of the team need to have that mindset. The key ideas here is that trust and psychological safety are needed, especially when you want to build rapid experimentation. The concept I was mentioning earlier, if you want to adapt to the market, changing quickly, a new competitor popping up, or new something changes in the market, and your product is no longer relevant with all these AI tools. I've heard a lot of seed stage companies that were relying on AI, and then Claude launches a new feature and your product is completely irrelevant, right? So you need to have that trust underlined and psychological safety so that your team can continue work on rapid experimentation. So what I mean by that is that you need to enable them to experiment within some safe guardrails. They need to be empowered to, within 2 weeks, this is what we're going to do. Go test it. Go test it because it's only 2 weeks. And then we're going to inspect and adapt. And if it didn't work, it doesn't matter because we only spent 2 weeks doing that. So for that, you need to also have a growth mindset, both the leader and the team. You need to understand that it's not about what you know today, but where you can go and where you can get and all the things you can achieve. You need to be constantly flexing that adaptability muscle. It's a muscle that you need to continue flexing that muscle. Um, and I keep going back to the leaders. The leaders need to model this behavior. If the leader doesn't show this, it just doesn't work, right? Like you can't expect the leader to be like that top down, this is what we're doing, and I'm expecting to do this, and there's no room for that experimentation. If you want them to adapt quickly to change, you need to give them that space for experimentation within some clear guardrails as well.
Yeah, so you need a leader, and I love some of the things you shared. So that builds a team based on trust. You talked about psychological safety, a growth mindset, and then rapid experimentation. It sounds like those are some of the pillars of this management philosophy, if you will, that you're talking about. But you also talked about something else, and that's the speed piece of this. And that's where the sprint comes in, right? So
Mhm.
the operating system is one thing. So you got to, and I think that, as we were talking about AI, in my experience, just making every piece faster is a good thing. But unless you connect all the dots and turn it into the operating system, it doesn't necessarily improve speed. It just makes maybe every piece faster, but doesn't produce it. So I think you're saying it's got to be a system. But let's get back to this idea of the sprint, because the sprint kind of forces this
Mhm.
action that's got to have a result, and then an analysis, and then another action, right? So talk to me about the idea how the sprint works in the context of this idea of an operating system.
Right. And this is where we go back to the second pillar, the practices. You
Mm.
need to have the mindset and then the practices. Because if you only focus on the practices, I've heard people say, oh, we've done agile before, it hasn't worked for us. Um, so it's not do agile, it's be agile. And that's where the principles that I mentioned earlier are super essential. So diving into the practices. So I talked about sprints, but there's a few non-negotiables here that we need to understand first. First of all, you need to limit work in progress. The most common thing that happens for small organizations or large 10 marketing team organizations or 20 or 30 is that too many teams work on 10 things at a time and they don't finish none of them well. So the core principle here is focus instead of 10, focus on three. Once you're done those three, you can move on. But the key to making that work is that you need to work in small increments of work. Minimum viable product or mindset. You've heard these from the product world, right? But how can you do that in marketing? You need to deliver value fast instead of waiting for something to be perfect. So when you do the refinement, you need to really, what is the minimum thing? Like we always, oh, but we got to do this and that. No, but really, do you actually need that? Can you do what is the 70% done that is going to work to see that this is working, that this can have an impact and that this is tied to revenue, and then eventually you can continue iterating on that and making it perfect in following sprints, right? Um, Another thing that is connected to this is avoid context switching. That is connected to the work in progress because if you don't focus on one or two things and you keep context switching, you're never going to finish. That is one of the things that there's research backed data that say that context switching kills productivity, right? For leaders, but also for managers and specialists. So it's also part of this. And then let me talk to you about that sprint base. So these are the core. I wanted to explain those as the core because when we talk about the sprint, this comes from the engineering world and running marketing teams like engineering teams with the term Scrum is running 2 week sprints. So you have 2 weeks to deliver that minimum viable product, and you're going to limit your work in progress while you do that. First, you're going to refine the work that the team is going to do. Then you're going to have a planning session with your team. Okay, now we've refined more or less the goals and how this is tied to revenue and why we need to do this. And at high level, like what we need to achieve, like what does that mean? And refine that MVP and create smaller chunks of work that you're going to commit with your whole team. Okay, I'm going to need help from design. I'm going to need help from the channel marketing. I'm going to need help from the product marketing or whatever need you're going to need in the team. You're going to raise that out loud during that planning session so that they know, the rest of the team know, and when everybody's planning, they're going to have some capacity allocated to those uh, priority um, projects,
Yeah,
right?
that is a powerful methodology. It seems like you're forcing people, it forces the leaders in the team to make hard choices. One of the things I've seen is if we're working on 10 things at the same time, then we never finish. We never really have to make any choices because all these things could be good, right? If you say, I'm only going to do two things or one thing in the next 2 weeks, I better do the right thing, right? So I've got to make some hard choices on that. So you've got to have leadership and teams that really are focused on making those kinds of good decisions. Let me come back to AI though, because I think that one of the things about the sprint that could be some pushback on organizations is they might say, well, hey, it takes us way longer than 2 weeks to do anything. Like, look at these. I want to build a whole set of new landing pages for this campaign, and I've got to write another white paper, and I've got to basically do some video recording. I got to get the video team out here, and I've got to run these ad campaigns, and I've got to put all this together to put this whole thing together. And it strikes me that if you leverage AI in these different steps, it enables this 2 week sprint. Feels like you can get more done and have the more complete campaigns. at every step. Are you seeing that impact? Are we able to get more done in these campaigns, or is it still the same? Like we're just trying to. It's okay to get less done as long as we have the minimum viable product, or maybe both of
I
those are
think
true.
I think 100% with AI speeds things up because you don't need to things that 5 years ago we needed to reach out to the videographer, give them the script and like the direction on what you wanted, and then they would go and do it, and then it comes back to you. You need to review and go back. So there's a lot of layers there. All that, if you can do it with a tool yourself, you're speeding that up from like 2 weeks to maybe even a couple days or even an afternoon, right? And I've done that with my team. For that, for even like sales enablement content or training, you can, there's so many tools out there, or with Claude or Lovable these days, you can create a prototype of something, of a marketing tool that you can use, right? So it's even more like AI is helping teams being more efficient and refine the work better, right? Like, because at the end of the day, you need to keep refining, and because you could do all these things, you could do the 10 landing pages, but the point is, can you do the one campaign where you need one or two landing pages with a video, with whatever, but the whole thing is complete, rather than 10 landing pages for three different projects, 20 emails for those three different projects? No, let's focus on the one project and what goes in there. And
Right.
it's counterintuitive for teams, that larger teams, or when you start having larger teams and people that only focus on email marketing or only content marketing. I think these days it's natural. The transition is going naturally into those P-shaped marketers that are not only pigeonholed in one area, but focus on the full stack,
Yeah.
especially leveraging AI.
It sounds like what you're saying is define what you can get done in that 2 week period of time based on the capabilities of your team and your budget and maybe your
Mm-hmm.
use of AI. And if you get better with AI, or maybe you have better vendors, or you have better process or whatever, you may be able to get more, but limit it to what you can actually commit to and achieve so that you can deliver something, so that you can test and learn, and so that you can iterate and continue to drive results. Is that kind of
100%.
the core of that methodology?
100%, because at the end of the 2 weeks, you're going to show the work, you're going to review the work with your team and with your stakeholders. I like to invite sales leaders to my sprint reviews, or depending on how big the organization is, I've sometimes even recorded the review with all my team, showing the why behind their activities and their achievements, and then sent it out to a Slack to all the organizations. So anyone in the organization could see what marketing was working on and why and what we were achieving. And it gives an opportunity for a check-in for feedback. Because when you share that, you're proactive sharing, you're soliciting that feedback. And then the rest of the organization and even your marketing team feels like, oh, now we're hearing what you're telling me sounds interesting. Maybe I hadn't thought about that, or maybe I had thought about that, but that didn't work. So it invites that conversation, and then it helps you recalibrate to plan again for the following sprint.
Yeah.
And that also allows you to have that constant prioritization. You're constantly checking in. Is this still the right thing to work on? Yes, okay. Is this still no, actually not. Sales is coming telling me that we need to close this big deal and we need to focus on doing something else. Oh, really? Let me look back at our backlog. Is this really like, do you want me to focus on that versus these other things? And then sales say, like the sales leader, we have an honest conversation. We say, oh, actually, yes, let's focus on this. This is gonna, like, this is critical. Or actually,
Yeah.
no, you know what? It can wait to the next 2 weeks and we're gonna plan for it, right?
So
So
prioritization is key, and that means you have to have alignment on goals and strategy and all with all the other leaders, and that's so critical. This sounds like a very logical, important, clear approach. What's the pushback? Why isn't every CMO operating this way?
that's a great question. I think number one is because they don't know. that it can work. Sometimes they've heard about it, or, oh, we've done, like I mentioned earlier, we've done agile, it didn't work in the past. Oh, that's for engineers. Oh, that's the Jira thing. Oh, it's just putting things in a board. It's more than that. It has the two components, the mindset and the practices. And um, another pushback could be it's just, it requires a lot of self-awareness, a lot of transparency, a lot of collaboration, a lot of open conversations and honest conversations within marketing and across teams. And not everybody feels comfortable with that,
Yeah,
right?
that makes
So,
sense. How do you deal with, I hear you talking about like psychological safety and trust, but it seems like in that environment, if the operating system isn't well tuned and the decision making isn't super crystal clear, you could create a system where you're just putting pressure on people, right? So you say, gosh darn it, you have to get that campaign done in 2 weeks. No matter what, it's got to go out, right? Or you've got to create all this collateral and the website's got to be updated and I need 13 landing
mhm,
pages and we've got to get the video shot and it's got to be done in 2 weeks. So you could really, I could see if management doesn't have the right mindset
mhm.
and you don't create the systems and process, you could really make life miserable for everybody on the team.
Oh,
How do you how
100%.
do you how do you avoid that?
So this is why the planning session is key, because you have the team that is going to execute the work, and they're going to refine the work and say, okay, I don't think I can do all this in 2 weeks. Okay, okay, you can't do it. Okay, what can you do in 2 weeks? Maybe you don't need to do like out of all these five things, you can do the five things, but at a 70% where they're well enough to be viable without being perfect. Instead of maybe dropping two for the following sprint so that it takes a full month to accomplish the whole thing, it's constantly forcing yourself to think in smaller bets, right? And of course, you're not going to pressure the team to work 10-hour, 12-hour days every day to make that achievement, because then it wouldn't work, right? One thing is a big launch. Maybe there's a few days you need to work a little bit more, but like this is about balance, right? And how, like, forcing yourself to prioritize, and something's got to give, right? And maybe it's just forcing yourself to what is that minimum valuable increment of value.
Yeah, and it sounds like having good leadership and good systems and processes is really key to executing there. Tell me about the business outcomes. We just have a few minutes left in this conversation, but you know, what are the business outcomes that leaders, CEOs should expect from an agile um, our operating system, a marketing operating system like this. I mean, if you really are delivering every 2 weeks, testing, learning, creating new tests, getting new things to the market every 2 weeks, you're doing 26 tests or 26 iterations of this cycle a year. What's the impact that leaders might expect on marketing results or revenue, or how should they think about it? Obviously, the specific results are going to vary, but what kind of results should business leaders expect from this system?
So first of all, faster execution, like we've talked about,
Yeah.
better alignment with revenue, because every 2 weeks you're inspecting and you're connecting the activities to your marketing strategy, to your KPIs, and eventually to your revenue. So better alignment. Um, More transparency and accountability, that I think is super important, not only for the marketing team, but as an organization. And another thing to connected to that growth mindset is that continuous learning and improvement, and being able to adapt fast to market changes. If you have a great team that is able to adapt, doesn't matter if you're selling one product, or in a month you're gonna release a new product, or you're gonna do something else, because the team is gonna have the right skills and the right tools to adapt and go market that new thing, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Very, very powerful ideas and very powerful system here. Um, if people want to, we're out of time for this conversation, but if people want to connect with you and learn more about you or how you might be able to help in this area, or just continue the conversation, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Well, they can connect with me on LinkedIn, Maria Scheifler. You can find me there. And DM me, and I'll be happy to continue the conversation about this topic I'm really passionate about. And also, I'm advising and doing some fractional CMO work with select tech organizations and professional services organizations.
That's great. Well, Maria, we'll put links to all of that in the recording here. Thanks again for taking the time to have this conversation.
Thank you so much, Peter.